Angel Studios is home to record-shattering cinema that amplifies light. A distribution studio with impactful top-grossing films for all ages, Angel is the industry leader in crowdfunding films and makes waves with strategically utilized theatrical marketing budgets made possible by their patent-pending pay-it-forward technology. Angel Guild audience members greenlight each production, building in box office success. Fans worldwide enjoy Angel's award-winning, viewer-supported, meaningful storytelling designed to inspire, uplift, and unite.
This is the Box Office Podcast. I'm Daniel Loria, the editorial director of Box Office Pro, the pulse of theatrical exhibition. And here this week, we are going to be going over the top 10 highest grossing horror movies of the last 10 years with Box Office Pro's Rebecca Pahle and Chad Kennerk. Now, we're all horror nerds here on this panel, and we understand that horror doesn't always work from a blockbuster tentpole level. Now, we do have to bring up, in the last 10 years, really maybe 15 if we want to go back, Blumhouse, the production company, has helped usher in a change that has been replicated by some other studios in really making wide appeal horror movies that are bringing back some of those ticket sales and cultural imprint that we found in the 1970s and the 1980s, turning horror away from this, let's say, more of a niche product maybe that we saw during the home video era into once again a multiplex destination genre. And that's why we're going over this list.
Absolutely. It's in a way, it's the MCU-ification of the horror genre. I mean, definitely everyone attempted to replicate that expanded universe, extended universe that the MCU nailed so spectacularly. Blumhouse definitely made it work. And I think chaining some of those films together into franchises really did give a must-see element to a lot of titles that may otherwise have been viewed as more dispensable or more niche.
Yeah, it's interesting talking about horror as a mainstream genre. Now, Chad, your roots to the horror genre run very deep. You've been involved with the estate of Vincent Price, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Victoria Price, his daughter, she does a lot for his estate to keep his legacy alive. And I've always kind of been drawn more towards the horror genre, even though I was quite a scaredy cat growing up. I think the first horror film I saw was Friday the 13th, and it scared the crap out of me.
Yeah, the Vincent Price horror, I love the old Hammer, and they weren't so much scary, I think, in a way.
They were gothic. And yes.
Yeah, atmospheric.
Yeah.
And it's interesting just to see how much the genre has evolved over the decades. Of course, you talk about a studio like Universal being part of that DNA of the horror genre. And you've seen it grown over the decades. You have the individual titles that you associate with certain studios. You think of Paramount, you think of Rosemary's Baby, you think of Warner Brothers, you think of a movie like The Exorcist.
Universal, obviously. The beginning of horror.
Yeah, all the classics,
yeah. Yeah, it's been a really interesting ride here as fans of the genre, different movements. But really, these last 10 years, as we see the multiplex embrace the horror genre, we've seen a different type of horror movie sort of evolve into this tentpole model. We're going to be going into that as a microcosm and bringing in maybe some personal asides, some of our own interests in the genre. Now, I did ask you, Chad, last week to show up ready with Vincent Price trivia. We have to start off with this, man. What's the first thing we need to let our listeners know about?
Okay, so at 1 month old, Vincent got a nickname. Do you know what it was?
I know. At 1 month old, the only thing I was telling my child was "Shut up, please."
Did he have the stash yet at 1 month? Or
yeah, I don't think so. Yeah.
Okay. What was it?
His nickname was the Candy Kid because his dad was vice president of the National Candy Company of St. Louis.
That's the dream. That's the dream.
Well, that's the scam right there. The dad clearly was like, listen, we need product to sell this candy in theaters. There's your pipeline. Exhibitions behind a lot of these innovations.
Yeah.
Well, let's get started here with the number 10 film on our list. The first Blumhouse title that we'll be talking about in this conversation, Five Nights at Freddy's, released by Universal on October 25th, 2023. An $80 million opening weekend, which is important because it's also the highest grossing day and date streaming release with theatrical of all time. That was astonishing for a lot of us following this industry. What we didn't expect was just how suddenly the grosses for this film would start falling after the opening weekend. So it really was just a opening weekend cash grab, but boy, what a cash grab it was having its day and
Hell,
date.
I'll take it. We went through that period where more films went day and date kind of as we came out of the pandemic, and it was a matter somewhat of necessity and then kind of decreased as time went on. I think the perception maybe with Five Nights at Freddy's was that Universal did not have confidence in the product, and maybe it wasn't necessarily that good, and that's why it's getting a day and date release. But yeah, it really connected to younger audiences, to Gen Z audiences who grew up with this franchise, a video game franchise that was quote unquote unadaptable. People were definitely curious about how they were going to pull it off, and there was a real eventization to going to see it in a crowded theater with others. And then once you've done that, your second, third, fourth viewings, if you're not into it, then later you're going to watch it on streaming. As you mentioned, that second weekend drop was really something. But I think it's part of a larger story that's really important about the evolution of the horror genre, kind of the relationship between horror franchises and streaming, and how streaming platforms have affected how horror movies are received.
Yeah, this is one of them in the sense that it's adapted from a horror video game that really targeted younger viewers. I wasn't familiar with the game at all. Chad, was this at all in like the realm of you were aware of this existing?
I knew that it existed, but I was
Yeah.
definitely too old to have really
I
had any
didn't.
interaction with it.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was as big a deal as it was. I mean, talking
Yeah,
to our VP of sales, Patricia Martin, how her son was like, "No,
right. This is
everyone
gonna be
in
huge.
my, it's
Yeah.
everyone's looking forward to this movie. You don't understand," and we didn't understand. And then $80 million later, oh, Gen Z will come out for the right movie, and I think Universal really hit the nail on the head with that one.
And that's just the target demo for horror in many ways, finding a way to get teenagers involved and getting those teenagers or people in their early 20s to come in and buy tickets for this genre is always crucial. As we mentioned, an $80 million debut, which was a massive surprise, a huge overperformer in a strike afflicted box office last October, ended up topping out at 137 million to hold on to this number 10 spot here. To talk about Five Nights at Freddy's, we also have to talk about Blumhouse, the production company behind the film itself, and a production company behind half of the 10 highest grossing horror movies of the last decade. And that, I think, is really part of what kicks off this conversation. When we talk about how the multiplex embraced horror over the last 10 years, we have to talk about how Blumhouse has helped make that a reality.
The evolution of horror into more of a franchise-based model, more of an MCUification of the horror genre, with the expanded universes, with the connections, with some films we'll be talking about later that are higher up on the list are remakes of older classics. I feel like there's definitely an emphasis away from one-offs and more towards how can we amp up horror as a property rather than
Mm.
just as individual films. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But I think it's definitely, like you say, Daniel, it's been one of the key parts of making horror so financially successful over the last 10 years.
And if our readers want to look at this list that we're going to go over and follow along with the episode on boxofficepro.com, you can find the full ranking of these 10 films. You'll find that half of them are from Blumhouse. You have the entire Quiet Place trilogy from Paramount. And then you've got right up top on number one, number two, both It movies in first place. It's really striking once you see that this is a certain version of horror movies that's being widely consumed. Now, that doesn't encompass the entire genre. There's been movements in this genre. I think the horror movies that maybe we single out as the most influential or interesting are not part of this list or don't even break near this list.
There are only two films on this list that are not part of overarching franchise.
So just
Number
two
nine,
one-offs. That's it.
two one-offs. I mean, you look at our number 9 earner here. a Blumhouse title as well, Split. I mean, I think it was the twist that it was in the M. Night Shyamalan universe, the Bruce Willis. Oh God, I'm blanking on the name of the Unbreakable.
Unbreakable, yeah.
That, I mean, it was, definitely not marketed as part of a franchise, but I think that twist was a huge marketing boost.
It helped elevate it.
We got Glass afterwards as well. So
yeah, but I think that's such an important point to bring up. It was the fact, and I don't think this is a spoiler. This many years in,
it came out in 2017.
Deal with it.
The dates
if you
passed.
didn't know, you'll live. But the fact that this movie Split, which ranks 9th in our ranking here, opened to $40 million domestic. So that's half the opening weekend of Five Nights at Freddy's, right? Five Nights at Freddy's tops out at $137 million domestic because it really doesn't find any traction once it's available in streaming day and date.
I mean, it was what we see a lot of for streaming platforms of the theatrical as part of the marketing for streaming.
Now, what happens to Split is off word of mouth alone, the multiplier here is actually pretty damn good. $40 million opening weekend. People start hearing that this is an interesting movie from Shyamalan, and hey, that the twist connects it back to Unbreakable. This finishes its run with $138.2 million, released January 20th of 2017. If you remember this, Rebecca, this is the first magazine issue that Film Journal International and Box Office end up releasing under their merger in 2017. This was the cover. This was the universal cover that we had at the time, was for Split. I didn't see the movie. I did see Unbreakable, but I at this point, I think I was off the Shyamalan bandwagon. Chad, did you catch this theatrically or at home?
I don't think I caught it theatrically. I was at the Glass premiere, but I think I caught Split at home. But I remember the word of mouth. I remember hearing a lot of positive things about it.
I was hearing at the time either this is positive or this is hacky and completely offensive to the mental health community and what have you. But whatever, wherever you fell on the quality of the movie, I'm kind of in the middle there. I don't think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, but it definitely really honed in on how a theatrical run can kind of roll the snowball of discourse down the hill and really really get some conversation going and make some of these movies that, I mean, I think if Split had come out on streaming, we wouldn't really be talking about it.
No, but I don't think Shyamalan would have been interested in that. I mean, he's a very pro-theatrical filmmaker. The fact that he was able to come back to this idea and deliver a movie with a twist ending that he maybe you roll your eyes at the Shyamalan twists, but this one I think was really well received. When the Shyamalan twist works, they deliver, right? I think Sixth Sense and Split are probably the two examples of like, hey, we sign up for this twist. And there was demand for Glass right after this. Quite a demand, actually. So it's interesting to see how Split really revitalized Shyamalan's career when it came out in 2017.
It was the James McAvoy performance we didn't know we needed.
Oh, and it kicked off a whole array of James McAvoy in his weird era. Yeah.
Didn't he come in as a late replacement? If I'm not mistaken, I think it might have been for Joaquin Phoenix. Not that he's known for walking out of films last minute or anything. But if I'm not mistaken, I think McAvoy came in last minute.
I can believe it.
For Phoenix.
James McAvoy's like, this is my moment. This is the role I was meant to let my freak flag fly to. God bless him.
Well, let's go now to number 8. Now, this isn't a Blumhouse title, but it is part of a trilogy. And this is how Paramount stakes its claim to this conversation. A Quiet Place Day 1, released this year, actually this summer, June 28th. In the middle of the 2024 Let's Recover the Box Office summer, opened to $52 million, a franchise best opening weekend, but it didn't really have the steam behind it to really leg out to be higher on our list like the first two Quiet Place movies are. $138.9 million domestic run. This was an interesting movie. I saw this while visiting my sister down in Austin at the Galaxy Theaters location on opening night. We got D-box seats, an extra large bucket of popcorn. Popcorn went everywhere. We had a great time.
It's a very theatrical franchise. I mean, I remember that being a lot of talk with the first film, and that people talking about the experience of seeing it in the theaters and about how disruptive it was when anyone would, like, a straw would squeak or somebody's popcorn would cry. It almost is kind of like an immersive seating sort of film, even if you don't actually do an immersive seating element. I mean, I was kind of surprised, honestly, to see that A Quiet Place Day One made it on the list. I enjoyed it, but I feel like it's another one that it was like a slow, and like the word of mouth kind of kept growing. There was never any one weekend that was, holy moly, this is a unexpectedly large gross. But I mean, it opened kind of right smack dab in the middle of the summer, which is unusual for a lot of horror films, and it just, it kept trucking along. Even, I mean, I think I saw it when it had already been in theaters for 4 or 5 weeks. Honestly, like, people kept coming.
How about you, Chad? Do you remember watching this?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I think for me, Lupita Nyong'o's performance kind of makes the film. I think it let me down a little bit in terms of that New York setting. I think, really had it ramped up in our minds. We talked about it for weeks, I think, on the podcast of like, how would you have survived? And where, So, but yeah, I mean, it's a fun popcorn movie.
Yeah, an exceptional horror movie, Cat.
Yeah.
Frodo.
That ended up being the number 8 movie in this list of the 10 highest grossing horror movies of the last 10 years. Paramount and this franchise in particular are going to come back with the prior 2 entries in a little bit further up this list. But on number 7, a very interesting entry here. I think audiences and horror fans will forgive a bad sequel. I don't think audiences and horror fans will forgive a bad remake. And there have been many remakes, and very few of them have been embraced by the horror community. I think David Gordon Green's Halloween from 2018, another Blumhouse title, maybe is the exception to that. The truth is, this isn't a proper remake. It's a remake cool, right?
Yeah, it's the reboot cool.
A reboot cool, and that's using terminology that I think another reboot coined, Scream 5, as a reboot cool itself. So it's a sequel, yes. I still put it in the remake camp because it revitalizes the genre. It doesn't really work strictly as a sequel or as a remake. David Gordon Green and Blumhouse tried this again with Universal with The Exorcist, with
That
the
did not work.
trilogy. It did not work. That was dead on arrival. But Halloween in 2018 opened the door to a lot of possibilities. I think this film was very well received. Opened on October 19th, 2018. We actually saw this together at a press screening, Rebecca. I don't know if you remember that, up in the AMC Lincoln Square.
Mm-hmm.
Chad, where do you remember seeing this?
I did see it in theaters. I would have been in New York, so it might have been the same theater, actually.
Opened to $76.2 million, topped out in 159.3. I was excited because it promised 2 additional films with Jamie Lee Curtis in them that I thought were going to be better than what we got. I think the disappointment I have when I see this title pop up anywhere is that I don't think David Gordon Green quite stuck the landing.
I'm sad we don't have our colleague Rush Fisher here on the podcast, because he is an apologist of the latter 2 films in that trilogy.
I'd say more the third one. To be fair, more the third one than the second one.
More the third one.
I don't think there's too many people that are going to give the second one a pass.
I honestly do not really enjoy the first one. Even it's too serious. I just don't. It wasn't for me.
I think it's better than a lot of what we've got in the Halloween universe. Is it better than Halloween 2 is a tough question for me to answer. I'm not sure.
Halloween 3 is still my favorite Halloween movie.
Season of the Witch.
Season of the Witch.
Bonkers movie. Yeah. Chad, how did you fall on this David Gordon Halloween? Because even though maybe Rebecca and I didn't love it, I thought there was so much potential for what was to come, and it just never came.
Yeah, I think I kind of fell in that camp too. I was like, okay, I could see this. I could be on board for this. But when the second one came out, that really lost me, to be honest. I don't know if I finished that movie.
Yeah. I think ultimately Halloween Kills, the follow-up to this 2018 title, the second movie in this David Gordon Green Halloween reboot-quel. Halloween Kills, I think, is hampered by pandemic-era filmmaking, in that I'm not sure they were given the freedom or flexibility to deliver maybe what they initially wanted.
It felt rushed.
A little bit, and it felt a little constrained. So I'm not sure. I'd be very interested to hear David Gordon Green's postmortem on that title. But I think that being a weak entry, I think impacted where they were going with the third one, which I find very ambitious and interesting. I'm not sure it's good, but ambitious and interesting sometimes is enough for a ticket purchase for me. Now, talking about pandemic era filmmaking, the next title on this list is influential and important by the fact that it was one of those titles that was supposed to premiere in March 2020, if I'm not mistaken. The press screenings had already taken place. Our interview, actually, for the March 2020 edition of Box Office Pro was locked in. I think we ran it, Rebecca, if I'm not mistaken. This might be the interview that we ran in 3 different magazines, because that March 2020 release, or maybe it was April, it gets completely pushed aside because of the pandemic. It gets rescheduled for late 2021, if I'm not mistaken, but it ended up getting moved up at the personal request of the filmmaker, John Krasinski himself, saying, hey, you know what? I think audiences are ready to come back.
And he went to theaters and did the personal greetings. He would like pop up at random screenings in Florida.
The AMC Sunset Place in Miami. That's my high school theater. That's where he went. It was great to see him there.
He was like the lead up to the Tom Cruise, Mission Impossible, Top Gun Maverick. I mean, that it was a really big movie kind of in this story of the horrible pandemic.
Well, we're talking about the top 10 highest grossing movies of the last 10 years. The fact that the first post-pandemic blockbuster, that's what I will call this movie, is in this list at 6, tells you something. A Quiet Place Part 2, opening on May 28th, 2021 to $47 million, ends up grossing $160 million. That's more than the pre-pandemic Halloween remake. I mean, that's a really, really good result.
I mean, there wasn't that much else to see.
To be fair, right?
But no, people went to see it. That's
I thought the film was okay. I was, again, a little disappointed with the title itself. It goes a little bit as a prequel. It does a bit of a Godfather Part 2 number here, where you see a little bit of what happened before the first title, and then we'll continue on with a sequel. The sequel part, I just wasn't as engrossed in this time around. I remember seeing this, IMAX at the AMC Lincoln Square. Where did you guys catch this?
I still haven't got it.
You still haven't seen it? Wow.
It's on my list.
Yeah, there's a lot of things on lists. How about you, Chad?
I was supposed to see this in early March of 2020.
Oh, there you go.
Were you living in New York at the time?
Yeah. It was like the New York premiere, and I was supposed to go, and I didn't go, and then I didn't see it until 2 years later.
Well, you got to it eventually. Did you enjoy it? Like, did it deliver on?
Yeah, I think similar thoughts to you, Daniel. Like, I was maybe more engrossed in that flashback sequence of the movie rather than where the story kind of picks up. Yeah,
and it's interesting that the title that followed this in the Quiet Place universe ends up being a prequel, right? That ends up going back to the beginning of all of this in an urban setting. Going up to number 5 here, talking about filmmakers and influential filmmakers that have launched a horror career in the last 10 years, Jordan Peele is the name that has to be on top of that list. There's a lot of other names, by the way, maybe names that I, as a moviegoer, like more. But in
Ari Aster and
Ari Aster, Robert Eggers, like there are filmmakers that I think I have more of an affinity towards. But when we talk about filmmakers in the genre that are relevant on a blockbuster level, Jordan Peele has to be there.
Yeah. And interestingly, I mean, 2 of his 3 feature directorial efforts are on the list. And this one, the 5th highest grossing horror movie of the last decade, Us, it wasn't one that I recall being super well liked at the time. The narrative and my personal opinion on it is, it's that Lupita Nyong'o performance is nuts. It's like the performances, not just from her, but from the cast, say, the movie. But the movie as a whole, I prefer Nope to Us. That's my Jordan Peele ranking, is Get Out, Nope, Us. But, I mean, it just really, like, this was a movie star movie.
Did you see it? Did you see it theatrically, Rebecca?
No, which might be why
I think
it didn't land as much for me.
I think that's one of the things about Us. I think
Yeah.
it works really well in a theater. I will say,
I watched it on a crappy DVD screener where I could barely understand the dialogue. Honestly, so
that makes
I
it
didn't
tougher.
see it in the right
And
way.
listen, that's we watch a lot of things every year. You can't make it out to see everything, and I think that hurts this title in the long run. That when you rewatch it on home video, on streaming or DVD, it doesn't have that same impact. Theatrically, I saw this on opening weekend back in March 2019. I remember coming out of South by Southwest, the reviews were hyperbolic, and that always gives me pause.
Festival reviews are hyperbolic and set up
From certain
unrealistic
bylines.
expectations.
Oh yeah, no, from certain bylines that you expect it from. So
Yeah.
there's clearly certain festival bylines that I know, like, ooh, if this person's overreacting, it's probably going to
Yeah.
be 3 notches below what to expect.
That person wants the pull quote.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of pull quote hunting ahead of Us, which hurt the film itself. I think it's a very interesting movie. Again, I'm not sure it's great.
It
But
doesn't stick
sometimes
the landing for me. But damn.
sometimes interesting can drive you through that running time, and maybe it sticks with you a little bit. The expectations were just massive after Get Out. I'm not sure anything could have met that. Chad, how did you react to this movie? You're in New York for this one as well. Where did you catch it?
Yeah, probably Lincoln Square. Yeah, I felt similarly. The hype and the buildup after Get Out was so big. I think no matter what film came out, there was going to be maybe some criticism about it.
The drawback here, I think, and this still happens to him, the fact that Get Out was about something, I think adds pressure for all of his movies to be about something and something bigger.
And then Nope was about something and something bigger, but I think having that Us in between kind of.
And then, that sometimes I think the critical interpretation or the drive to a hot take, not even a hot take, or a drive to have a drive to have an opinion sometimes distracts a movie itself. I think Nope for me was very entertaining. Nope being a film that we've talked about or mentioned several times in this episode that doesn't rank in the top 10. But like you, Rebecca, that I enjoyed tremendously. Us isn't a film that I think I enjoyed, but Us as a horror film, I think is a very effective horror film. As a horror film is a horror film that can bring in audiences, that's unsettling, that's disturbing. For whatever reason, I don't think it's going to be looked back upon as one of Peele's finest. And I think it's unfair. I think, honestly, it's because it doesn't play as well on home video.
Us is being the third best film from Jordan Peele. I mean, it's still better than the first best film from a lot of other people. So
absolutely. I remember seeing this at the Dolby Cinema on AMC 34th Street on the west side. The one
it must have sounded so good. Like the sound.
And that's what I'm talking about. I think maybe some people that are listening to this are like, wait, what's this guy talking about? What do you mean it doesn't play the same at home than it does in a theater? Go to a Dolby Atmos auditorium, go to an IMAX auditorium, sit down uninterrupted with great sound, with great image quality, and just be completely engrossed in a film. It's hard to replicate that at home. I don't care how much you spend on your home entertainment system. And under the perfect circumstances, certain films are elevated, and Us, I think, is one of those movies. Obviously, the box office receipts prove that, being at the midpoint of this list. The domestic opening weekend for Us was 71 million, and it ended up topping out at 175 million. That's a very different multiplier than what's next on this list. We're talking about Jordan Peele right now. Now, the number 4 movie on this list is Jordan Peele's theatrical debut with Get Out, which opened in February 2017. This Blumhouse title opened to $33 million. Pretty good opening weekend for a horror movie, but maybe nothing to say is going to break records. So far on this list, the number 4 movie has the lowest opening weekend of any of the movies we're talking about. In fact, I'll spoil it right now. This is the lowest opening weekend anywhere on the top 10 of the 10 highest grossing movies on this list. So a $33 million weekend.
I mean, from Jordan Peele, a sketch comic.
Yeah, I think that the hype here wasn't really too. It was a curiosity, maybe.
Yeah, it was like the Quiet Place, directed by Jim from The Office. Okay,
let's give it a chance. February release. That says what it says. $33 million opening in February. Not bad, guys. Domestic total here is 176 million. The word of mouth on this one was not only well earned, but it was fantastic, and it's It's one of those movies that I think, for me, when I think about movie going in the 2010s, when I think about movie going in New York City, period, my entire time living in the city, I'll never forget watching Get Out on a crowded theater at the Alamo Drafthouse in Brooklyn, and the reception that that movie got. Just how connected we were all in, from the first jump scare to the little bit of a twist ending that isn't a
To
twist.
Allison Williams eating the cereal with the milk separately. I mean, I just a lot of, I think, the discussion and the word of mouth with this film, yeah, Daniel, was just how good it worked as a crowd watch.
It really, really did. I want to hear where you guys saw this.
I didn't see it until, I think, awards season, because the way this played out, by the time we got to the 90th Academy Awards, it was getting a lot of awards buzz. So I think that's actually where I caught it. It was around that time.
Yeah, really at the latter end of its life cycle. Oh man, seeing it with a paying audience that opening weekend in Brooklyn was incredible. It was fantastic. And I don't know, for whatever reason, like, packed horror screenings of new releases at that Alamo Drafthouse in Brooklyn, or like, it's like a perfect venue for that. I think it's a venue that I associate. Oh, there's an exciting horror movie, I'm going to go down to Brooklyn to see that at the Alamo. It works really well. The same way that when you think of a premium auditorium in Manhattan, you think about that AMC in Lincoln Square. For whatever reason, anytime I want to see one of these theatrical titles, I do head it down there. That was my experience here. I think it's fair to call this the most consequential horror movie of the 2010s. It's in the short list of the best movie of that decade.
I'd put it up there. Yeah, definitely
Maybe
a horror.
top three, top two. Oh, horror by far. Horror, I mean, it's there, period. But movies, period.
The screenplay is just
fantastic.
It's freaking impeccable.
But I would elevate it. It's just all movies, period. It's in the top three, top five of the best movie of the decade. Get Out. That's how much I enjoyed it. Launched that career from Jordan Peele, a career that we're still seeing develop in front of us. Yeah, one of those experiences I don't think I'll ever forget. Now, I'll say the same thing about the title that is on number 3 in this list. I think a movie-going experience that everyone is going to cherish the first time they saw this in a theater. Another title that I don't know how you see this at home, A Quiet Place, opened in April 2018 from Paramount, $50 million opening weekend. Again, word of mouth drives this to blockbuster status, $188 million domestic run. This was a landmark on West 57th when I first saw it, where I first saw it. Now it is a Look Dine-In Cinema on West 57th.
Oh, that's where I saw Cats.
Look at that. I thought Landmark did a really good job.
That's kind of a horror movie.
That's what I was going to say.
A horror movie. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely a horror movie, Rebecca. But yeah, that location, West 57th, now operated by Look Dine-In Cinemas. Man, that auditorium was quiet that entire time. Rebecca, where did you see this?
I think the AMC 34th.
I saw it AMC Lincoln Square. Do you remember before they put in the Dolby venue
auditorium one had the two floors?
Yeah. So I was on like the top balcony of that second floor, and there weren't that many people. It was like a midday screening, but I just remember being
you can camp out
so on the edge of falling over that balcony.
I'm trying to eat my popcorn as silently as I can possibly manage.
I'm still eating the popcorn. Floor, by the way, Dolby still has that second floor.
Good.
So when you come back, that's
where I'll
there. Yep. Yeah, it's not a bad place to sit in that auditorium. I'm a fan of it. Yeah, man, I will never forget that first screening of Quiet Place, seeing it with a paying audience. That's the type of movie that I had friends that don't watch movies emailing me and asking me about, texting me about. The same thing with Get Out. It really felt like part of something, like you're part of a bigger cultural conversation. Both A Quiet Place and Get Out. I don't think any of the other movies on this list get that. And
I would maybe give it to the number one movie on the list.
I think I would too. I would.
Well, the number one, number two kind of are combined. Let's transition to that.
Yeah.
So you guys think that it was that much of a talking point?
I think the chapter 1, yes. I think the top grossing horror movie the last decade with $327 million.
Top grossing movie of all time. Now, is it the best attended? Has it sold the most tickets? probably not, we don't have records for that, but when we talk about dollar gross, in dollar gross, It
I
Chapter
remember
1 is the highest grossing horror movie of
because
all time.
it came right on the heels of like Stranger Things was a thing, so it kind of rode on the wave of that 80s nostalgia. One of the actors from Stranger Things is in it. It felt to me like it was one of those horror movies that crossed over to being more of a general phenomenon. I mean, I think it really speaks to the fact that It Chapter 2 was made so much money, $211 million, opened almost to 100 million. I mean, I don't think It Chapter 2 is all that good.
Well, let's
Like,
go over these numbers real quick.
yeah.
The first part opens in September 8th, 2017. Released by Warner Brothers, $123 million domestic debut, ends up leaking out to $327 million. Again, a fantastic multiplier. You need word of mouth to get there. In second place, It Chapter 2 opens that same weekend 2 years later, September 6th, 2019. It makes 91 million in its debut and ends up leaking out to $211 million. Now, yes, that's a significant step down from the first one, but still high enough to be the number 2 title here. Should we talk about this as one movie, It and It Chapter 2, or does it feel very much like two separate entities?
To me, it feels like two separate entities, if only because the second one brought in the adult cast, so it's like a different cast for most of the.
And you
You know,
mentioned the Stranger Things impact being a big part of that appeal of the
I
first one.
think so.
Obviously, that's not
Yeah,
going to carry over to the sequel, so that can't be
Yeah.
overlooked.
And there was a novelty factor too, I think. I mean, it was around the time, I don't know if you remember, but it feels like there was a Stephen King adaptation coming out every week. Like there was Gerald's Game in 1922 that Netflix did. There were a lot of across theatrical, streaming, TV. There was just a ton of Stephen King everywhere around this time. I think it's worth pointing out too that between it and It Chapter 2, that's when David Gordon Green's Halloween comes out. I mean, I think there's an impact there on Hollywood's willingness to remake older quote unquote classic titles.
$500 million generated in box office from these two It movies. I didn't watch either. Chad, did you catch them in theaters?
I did. I'm not sure where I saw them, but I did watch them in theaters. And I remember the first one being one of those horror movie experiences where the audience was going
When Pennywise
crazy.
was doing like the
The
dancing and
dance,
stuff,
yes.
I was like, oh my
Oh.
God. And that trailer was really good. That trailer killed too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I remember the audience reaction, certainly of the first one.
And then the second one, it just kind of lost a bit of that novelty. The book is kind of
Yeah.
split into two
Mhm.
parts, and I think in the novel, it's the kids as kids and the kids of adults is they cut back and forth, whereas the films cut them into two
Have them
separate films.
separated.
And plus, the ending of it is not that great. I mean, it suffers from Stephen King kind of, he famously doesn't know when he starts a lot of his stories where they're going to end, and you can tell with it because it kind of just that ending keeps going.
Well,
For
I think
hundreds of pages.
Well, yeah, that's a source material.
It's a
issue,
tough
right?
to adapt. Yeah.
I was, of course, very, very aware of the miniseries from, what was it, 1990?
Yeah.
I remember in like Mexican Blockbuster. When I say Mexican Blockbuster, I mean Blockbuster Video in Mexico. That's what it means. So growing up in Mexico, going to rent movies, I remember the VHS box of It, the TV series, and the two box tapes there, just as something that was forbidden and it was scary. And I was just never really interested beyond that to ever watch it. I think as a film itself, I was not a Stranger Things guy. And this was a little bit too much in the vein of Warner Brothers' New Line September multiplex horror
Nostalgia.
that never really calls my attention that much. We mentioned this at the top of the episode that the movies here represent a phase in horror movies, the multiplex era of horror movies, especially in the last decade, beyond that, 10 years in general. But it isn't necessarily a list going into our favorite horror movies or the reason why we go to horror movies. And I think it is the type of big studio movie that I'm just not interested in. Like The Conjuring, like The Nun, that's just not what I need. A hook, like A Quiet Place or Get Out, or like a very strong auteur vision to get me there.
I would give the first one a shot. I think the Pennywise performance is good. I would definitely watch the first one. I mean, I think it's definitely a case of, I mean, the director of both of them, Andy Muschietti, previously had done the short version of Mama and then the feature version. So he did a small budget, well reviewed, but definitely not like blockbuster material horror movie. And then he just took on this, adapting one of the most iconic horror books of all time, and definitely box office wise killed it, to the point where he was hired on as the seventh or eighth or ninth director to direct The Flash. And he
Did what
brought
he could.
he
Did what he
landed
could.
that ship. They brought that movie out, for
That
better
movie
or
was
worse.
released, which there was a point in time where we weren't sure that movie would be released. Yeah, I think I saw The Flash. I think he did a good job there, as far as we can go. Chad, your impression of it, in this context of what role it has in horror, because it's a big title here. When we talk about the highest grossing, again, not highest attended, we're not going to bring that into this conversation, but in terms of dollar gross, the highest grossing horror movie of all time, that's a big, big accolade to bring into this title.
I think there was a certain generation that was a certain age where this was kind of an entry point to horror.
Yeah.
I remember feeling that there was a younger audience that I was with at the time. And I think that this may have opened the doors for them.
It felt very epic in scope for a movie set in small town Maine. It felt blockbustery. I don't know what the budget was, but it looked every dollar of it.
But
Yeah.
what Chad says, I think, is super interesting. And I think that's something we can't overlook here. The fact that a multiplex horror movie like this ends up being the entry point to the genre for a new generation. We can all say, this is the movie that got me into horror, or the theatrical movie that got me into horror. I think generations around my parents' age, a lot of them will say The Exorcist, some will say Rosemary's Baby, two movies that are now my favorite movies because my parents loved those movies.
I remember, for me, Signs was the one that's my visceral memory of seeing it and just being scared.
Yeah. Chad, for you, what was your entry point at the movies with horror?
I think we talked about this. It was the remake of House on Haunted Hill, because I was just...
Yes! Jeffrey Rush is a roller coaster tycoon.
But that got me interested, and, I wanted to see more.
Oh, for me, it was Scream. When first Scream movie opened in theater, I wasn't old enough to see it, but
I didn't see it in theaters, but that was like VHS
exactly.
heavy
that was
rotation.
A VHS. That's a movie that I begged my parents to go see. I ended up sneaking into it. Sorry, that was in Brazil. No U.S. exhibitor is on the hook for that. For all I know, they were letting teenagers in Brazil for it. Who knows? But it was such an important movie for like young people. It seemed like it was a cool high school movie to do. If you were in high school and you wanted to be part of the cool conversation, you saw Scream, and you saw Scream at the movies.
And it gave you all these rabbit holes to go down in a way that didn't feel condescending. It's like it works on its own, even without the nostalgia callbacks.
That just opened up, I mean, obviously, Psycho, Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street. I mean, watching Scream at the movies and that being part of what is your entry point to horror opens all those doors that you talk about, Rebecca. And that, I think, really changed my relationship to movies, definitely at a very formative age. I mean, calling me a teenager at the time, I must have been like 12, 13 tops. I 100% snuck into that movie, probably paid for a ticket to see Austin Powers and ended up going to Scream.
Did you pay for those? It's like all the kids who supposedly, allegedly, maybe paid for the Wild Robot to see Terrifier 3.
I will not confirm or deny I was part of that problem. But again, different country, different set of exhibitors. So we won't go too much into detail on that. But that's a big part. I think if you watch that big horror movie that's playing at the mall, that's the first point of entry, right? Because a lot of horror doesn't even get to that mall movie theater. A lot of horror you have to dig through to watch.
And you feel, I mean, I love Scream, but I don't remember the first time I saw Scream all the way through. I know it was on VHS. I know it was at home. I remember seeing Signs. It's been said a bazillion times, horror and comedy are the two genres that I think benefit the most from seeing them in a crowd.
So I have to ask you guys, as we talk about these horror movies that we already went through this list of the top 10 highest grossing horror movies of the last 10 years. For you personally, are there any horror movies that you believe that you like so much personally that we should bring up, or that have been so influential that trying to shoehorn them into a highest grossing conversation doesn't really make sense for the impact they had?
I think we discussed, filmmaker oriented. Eggers and Ari Aster. I loved Midsommar a lot. Looking at, I'm combing through the list here. There has just been a ton of international horror over the last decade that has, whether it debuted on streaming or theatrical, I think the fact that it's much more accessible. I always remember when one of them displayed the limits of the streaming model, a festival hit, One Cut of the Dead, that popped up on Amazon when it wasn't supposed to. So anyone could just upload it on Amazon. And I remember getting an email from my friend who was doing PR. It's like, no, that's illegally uploaded.
Oh, no.
There's an actual release coming. But no, yeah, things like The Wailing or Train to Busan, definitely.
Train to Busan was the last 10 years. My God, I love that movie.
Yeah.
We talk about it, that's just the height of post Romero zombie movies for me. That's not even
it's a classic. Crimson Peak.
You brought up a couple names there. For me, Eggers and The Witch was just such a revelation.
The Vavitch.
That was the star-making turn for Anya Taylor-Joy. Anyone that watches The Witch sees Anya Taylor-Joy and says, this is going to be a superstar. This is going to be an A-list superstar.
Ditto Black Phillip.
And Black Phillip probably being my favorite supporting character in a horror movie in the last decade as well. Absolutely loved it. That's probably on top of my list, but really close to it, Hereditary and Midsommar as a duo. Hereditary coming out in 2018, I think, after a very divisive and nasty 2016 election, that not only in terms of rhetoric, but also in terms of the conversation people were having at home, where the real horror movie really seemed to be the dinner table in the United States, and just how the nuclear family through generations would find divisiveness within it. Hereditary hit that. I'm not saying it was made to reflect it, or that it was at all in the back of Ari Aster's mind, but it's a sort of right movie at the right time, where that atmosphere of terror, of domestic nuclear family terror and generational tensions that is in Hereditary is probably, for me, the best reflection of that 2016 election and the aftermath of it. And I know we're in another election year, and a lot of those vibes I still think back.
And we have a Robert Eggers movie. The fact that
we have another Robert Eggers movie.
The director of the Witch has a big budget movie coming out on Christmas Day. The fact that the Lighthouse was as popular as it was. There's some special sauce that he has, I think, and Ari Aster as well. If Martin Scorsese says you're on the right track, then you're a great filmmaker. Then
and of course we remember Scorsese being very impressed by Hereditary when it came out. And then I don't know what I expected from Midsommar, and I saw Midsommar at the press screening at the Dolby 88 screening room here with the chief technology officer of our parent company, Guillaume Fillier. I invited him to watch it, and I was just absolutely floored by it. If we talk about,
it's a really dark comedy date movie.
Oh, it's a breakup movie, and I don't think I've seen. And listen, again, Mexican culture is a culture where the best music comes from breakups. It's a big heartbreak culture for some reason. I don't think I've ever seen a movie that has gotten a breakup as right as this one. Now, you can bring up movies like Annie Hall. I think it's breakups right,
but it's on the nose.
It's on the nose, and it's comedy, and it's fine. But Midsommar, for me, just every bit of difficult moments I had in my lifetime going through breakups, I saw them, and I saw myself reflected in Midsommar as I was watching it. It brought back a lot of baggage, and that ending, it felt like I left the baggage on that screen. It's a very emotional connection I have to Midsommar. One of probably the movies I've most personally reacted to in my lifetime. So I think Hereditary for me was just a reflection of where the culture was at the time. And Midsommar seemed a lot more intimate.
It was like a knife between the ribs.
It really, really was. Yeah. Chad, for you, what are the horror movies that have most impacted you in the last 10 years?
Well, it's so interesting because I definitely have to echo you both. I think Robert Eggers and Ari Aster Daniel, you mentioned earlier that Alamo Drafthouse in Brooklyn. I saw a really early screening of Hereditary there.
Ooh.
It was I hadn't watched the trailer. I don't even know if there was a trailer out yet, and went into it totally blind.
I love that experience. I
It
love
was
doing that.
amazing. And then Ari Aster did a little like talk back after with Millie Shapiro, the little girl, and it was hard to have just watched that film and be listening
Oh
to a
God.
conversation with her. Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, you need to give me a minute.
Yeah. I'm gonna need a minute. Yeah. So that definitely sticks out.
Well, I think it's also important to say that we're bringing up Aster and Eggers as names that emerge from these smaller movies and who have continued making similar scaled movies. I think The Northman's a very ambitious movie, but it's still a focus feature release, right?
Yeah.
I think Ari Aster as well has been moving into a bigger scale and a bigger scope, but you still see a lot of that DNA of an independent filmmaker behind it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the names that I wish was part of this conversation, but isn't, is Jeremy Saulnier, who
Green
was,
Room.
again, that's
Green
the movie I was going to
Room.
bring up. Even before Green Room, something like Blue Ruin, which is before this 10-year cycle that we're saying, right? Blue Ruin came out, 2013? Terrific film.
Great movie. Oh, yeah.
And then to follow Blue Ruin with Green Room. Green Room in 2015, I saw that the Nighthawk in Williamsburg. Man, that's a great movie.
Mm-hmm.
Just terrifying movie. And I really thought that was going to be the launch of a filmmaker that we'd be talking about in all his movies everywhere. Unfortunately, he went to Netflix. The Green Room, seeing that in a theater, you also felt you were part of something special. And that's how I felt about Ari Aster's movies, about Robert Eggers' movies. You're seeing someone at work that you realize you're in on a conversation that's about to get more interesting.
Yeah, I really like the two horror filmmakers, Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead. They did The Endless, which is a really good one. They're big on the, festival circuit horror. But then they just kind of got sucked into the Marvel TV universe of doing some episodes of Loki.
Heartbreaking.
Because I like them, but I don't care to watch Moon Knight. I don't care.
You don't want to see them do She-Hulk episodes, man. Come on.
But Resolution and The Endless are two, I think, really, really cool, low budget horror films that go weird places.
I will come up with a new name because another thing I love about horror is we're talking about right now is it's a launching pad for great talent, both for actors and directors. Beth de Araujo made a movie in 2022 named Soft and Quiet, which for me is one of the best movies of the 2020s. Absolutely dark, just frenetic, wonderful, nasty little masterpiece that I can't recommend enough.
I'm looking at the IMDb page for it now, and on the poster, it's a Blumhouse. Blumhouse distributed it.
It's a low budget Blumhouse title. I'm glad that Blumhouse got involved with something like this. Guys, this is, for me, the horror gem of the last 10 years. And this is a filmmaker that I cannot wait to see their next work.
Well, I really loved Coralie Fargett for, I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but The Revenge. And obviously then she came back with The Substance, which is one of my favorite movies that I've seen this year. A great horror comedy. And I think it's amazing how wide a release a film like that got. Chad, did you ever end up catching it?
No, I still haven't, but it's definitely on my list.
I'm so surprised so surprised and pleased that I was able to see that movie at an AMC.
Well, as we're coming to a close of this conversation, thank you to our listeners for joining us as we go over not only the top 10 highest grossing movies of the last 10 years, but also the ones that we believe were most influential or the ones that really we connected as viewers the most. We opened, Chad, with you providing a little bit of trivia on the Vincent Price side. We're going to close with it. You got to hit us with one more Vincent Price trivia hour here. We know that his dad worked for the candy company, and now we know why he launched a career in cinema, clearly. What else do we have to know about him?
One of his early films where he played a villain, it required two cameras to operate at the same time, which meant he had to do all of his own stunts, including running under a falling balcony. with
Hold on, what age are we talking about? Because Vincent Price was around for a while.
Is this like back when he was still like in the like historical dramas, or had he made the transition over?
You would consider this horror, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what film do you think?
Oh man, I'm gonna have to go early Vincent Price here because he was around for a while. I can't imagine him doing those stunts late in life. Rebecca, help me out here.
I got nothing.
So it was House of Wax in 1953.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's a physical role, right? Like that's
And because it was in 3D, they had the multiple cameras shooting at the same time for the 3D effect.
Right. That's what you did.
Yeah.
53.
Yeah.
He must have been early 40s. That's a good workout for early 40s, man.
Yeah, there's a great exhibition story related with that. He was performing in a play in New York when that was running, and he went to the theater, sat behind these two girls, and at the very end, he leaned over and said, "How did you like it?" or something to that effect. Scared the crap out of them.
That's a classic jump scare.
That's a great. You got to take advantage of that moment.
Yeah,
you got to pay him. I love it. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us here on this special Halloween episode of the Box Office Podcast. We'll be back with more box office analysis and exhibition news next week as we go over the November preview, including what we expect to be one of the biggest Thanksgiving holiday weekends of all time coming up next month. Thank you again for listening, and we'll talk to you again next week. The Box Office Podcast is produced by Record Edit Podcast and the Box Office Company. New episodes every Thursday. If you like what we do, please rate, review, and share our work with everyone you know. Thanks again.